My welcome, dear students. Today we'll talk with you about branches of law in Russian Federation, so it's the continuance about previous topics, and the more contract explanation for you how to use different laws to regulate the relations between the individuals, the organizations, and the government. First of all, we should talk with you about the jurisdiction of Russian Federation, which includes lots of possibilities and lots of conditions which help us to understand the future regulation. The first principle and the first one of the main ideas is that adoption and amendment of the Constitution of Russian Federation and federal laws and supervisions of compliance with them. So it means that the Constitution is the main law of the country, has the biggest power, and the other legislation items are in close connection with it and helps to regulate most of the relations, and it is the basic of the regulation in Russian Federation and in most countries of the world. So the next principle is the federal structure and territory of Russian Federation. This point says about the way of regulation on which territory and on which organs can be the regulation of jurisdiction in this country. The next step is that regulation and protection of the rights and liberties of the individuals and citizens, citizenship of the Russian Federation, and regulation and protection of the rights of national minorities. It means that in the jurisdiction we also can find the norms which help us to understand the rights of the citizens, the possibilities of their behavior, their way of actions, and so on. It can regulate the age, it can regulate the labor relations, family relations, other deals, contracts, and so on. Lot of actions which are made every day is regulated by the legislation and the jurisdiction of Russian Federation, and by this we can see also the possibilities for citizens to understand how they should behave to live in a legal and comfort country. Also, this part says us about regulation for different parts of citizens which have special regulation. For example, in a case of age, they're too young or they're rather old already, or in a case when they're some special subjects and have possibilities to have some extra money or something like that. So, next one of including is establishment of a system of federal bodies of legislative, executive, and judicial power, procedures for the organization and activities thereof, formation of federal bodies of state power, and federal and state property and management thereof. So, in this situation, we say about the regulation of actions of the government and its bodies, its parts, of three powers of the state, the special procedures, how to act, how to organize the work, and so on. Also about the regulation of the property of the state, and so on. The next one is about determining the basic principles of federal policy and federal programs in the field of national structure, the economy, the environment, and the social culture of national development of the Russian Federation. So also one of the main parts of regulation are the development of Russian Federation in different social systems, such as cultural, for example, such as social, some national questions also. An economical question, environmental question are very important for every country, also for Russian Federation. So in legislation there should be the regulation of this question, and it is the way of making it better with the help of legislation and with putting an information in it about those points. So the next includence is establishment of the legal framework for a single market, financial, monetary, credit, and custom regulation, issuance of money and guidance for private policy in federal economic services, including federal banks. Of course, the economical system is very important in every country. So in this part, we talk about a big question of this regulation, from creating the money system till the big regulation, from the article which says that the national money of Russian Federation is ruble and kopeka, till the possibility of the federal parts or regulation of federal economic services. So we see a rather big and big system, and it includes a lot of parts, from the macroeconomy to the federal economy. So the next includes is the federal budget, federal taxes and levies, and federal funds for regional development. As in every country, it has to regulate a lot of questions. Questions of building roads, for example, for regulating the medical system, for regulating the ecological situation in the country, payments to state workers, a big number of different regulations. So every year, at the end of the year, they create a new budget to the next year, dividing money to like in bigger part or smaller part to each of the parts to solve the problems in it, if there are some, or still to get in that position the regulation sections. Also, if we talk about taxes, we talk about the payments. In different countries there are different type of taxes. For example, in Russian Federation we can pay for cars if we have some. For the land also there are taxes. Taxes on work. In more contract way, it should be saying like on payments from work, and so on. All these taxes go to complete the federal budget and to federal regulation for the good living in each country. So the third part is about funds. For example, some funds for helping people in some bad conditions, in a way of in the situation of fires, for example, and for example for those families which have a lot of children and so on. So the next point is federal power guides, nuclear energy and fissile material, federal transportation, railways, information and communication, and space activities. As you understand, the transport question is very important in every country, so it needs to regulate this question from the smallest question to create a good road to the big question for example, regulating the question of lines in every country, and in, for example, railways, also building new stations and so on. talking about the energy which should be given to every region and every house, build special stations which will transport this energy from one to another. Also, if you talk about nuclear energy, I think you understand also this should be stations, and stations should be in good conditions, not to create some international catastrophe. Also space activities, solving questions with new knowledge, and so on. Going to next one, foreign policy and international relations of the Russian Federation, international treaties of the Russian Federation, questions of war and peace, international relations with different countries. They show good or not very good, can't say bad, but also can be. We talk about the solving the questions between leaders of each country, and about the economical questions, not just wars and peace, about the cooperation with other countries, selling or buying some energy, for example, or other recyclable items, or for example cooperation in some nuclear program, or transport regulation, and so on. See, a lot of questions. Next one, foreign trade relations in Russian Federation. So in this case we talk about more of contract question of international regulation in foreign trade. The next one is defense and security, defense production, determine procedure for the sale and purchase of arms, ammunition, nuclear hardware and other equipment, production of fissionable material, toxic substance, and narcotics, and procedure for the use of therefore. Also the question about international relations, mostly international, some regulation in the country, which shows the necessity of the social regulation between people, and mostly the regulation on the international area. So the next three is defining the status and protection of the national borders, territorial waters, airspace, the exclusive economic zone, and the continental shelf of Russian Federation. Of course, as the Russian Federation has the biggest territory in the world, among other countries, it should be regulated in a very strict way, showing the friend relations with other countries, but not to forget to protect their own. Also to solve the questions between with water territories, and for example sea territories, or also territories in which there are special continental shelf near the country, but further will be international waters, and also solve questions with those relations, which can create some problems in a case of pirates, for example. It also can be the question to regulate, but it will be better to give an example in previous part. Economic zone, which also needs to be regulated, especially airspace, as the space above the country is used by other air companies, and needs the permission to go through it, and so on. So the next is law courts, procurator, prosecutors, in other case criminal procedure, penitentiary legislation, amnesty and pardons, civil procedure, arbitration procedure legislation, legal regulation of intellectual property, and so on. So we see the system of legal regulation and solving the question of protection. First of all, protection like in a case of protection of rights, protection of lives, and so on. Also the special procedure to solve other problems with property, for example, and so on. A lot of questions to solve in this system. Also federal conflicts of law rules. It's one of the questions which can be regulated by legislation. So in a case when you have two laws which regulate the same question but in different ways, federal conflicts, these federal conflicts can be solved by special regulation in legislation of Russian Federation. So the next two. Here we go to meteorological surveys, standards, models, the metric system, time management, geodesy, and cartography, names of geographical objects, official statistics, and accounting. As you see, here is the question of territory and its regulation. It can be seen that the question is not very important, but to regulate the question with names, for example, not to double them or to double them in different regions, also to regulate the status of these settlements, is the city or just a village, and so on. Also measures, creating the cartography, protection of ecology, and so on. You see that also the question of legislation. The next one is state decoration, honorary titles of the Russian Federation. So the anthem, for example, their creation and their regulation, should it be new or just the old one. Also the situation with protection of this title, and so on, the flag, and so on. I see that a lot of usually in countries they have several of them. For example, in the Russian Federation it's the anthem, the flag, and so on. So also federal state services, regulation of their work and their possibilities for registration, for example, or to giving the answers on some questions, and so on. So now let's talk a bit about the dividing of Russian law. Well, not even just Russian. It's this table is good for understanding for different countries, because in most European countries, for example, in some Asian countries, there are some similar or very close systems which can show the branches of law. So the main branches of law is the constitutional law, because it has the basic information, the basic principle for regulation, the whole situation in the country, and after that, basing on constitutional law and the principle of constitution on its articles, there are already some others fundamental branches of law. They are called also primary, and in substantive law we include civil, administrative, criminal law. So they are like basic branches of law which include the most important information in the sphere of regulation of this law. Every law like material law with the articles, how the relation should be, there should be also a system, a procedure, how to solve the problem in a case of the question will be in the court. So for civil law, we have law of civil procedure. For administrative law, we have law of administrative procedure. And in criminal law, we have law of criminal procedure. So these three are the basic. Let's go to the specialized branches of law. In most situations, these branches are created from the basic branches. For example, it was the part of the basic branch, but it grew much bigger. So already they said that it's a specialized branch of law, usually individual branch of law. So, for example, labor law about workers, land law about the property of land, financial law about taxes, social security law about work of special organs, family law about relations between two individuals including family, penitentiary law, and so on. These branches are rather independent, but they can sometimes use the basic principles of civil, administrative, and criminal law. Also, we can talk about composite branches of law. Here are some mixture of those branches about which we talked before. In most situations, we can find also basic items or terms in substantive or something in specialized branches of law. For example, if we talk about business law, we will talk about the mixture of civil law, administrative law, and sometimes some economical regulation, for example, financial law. About environmental law, here we will talk about the regulation in some regulation, parts of regulation in criminal, administrative, civil law. Also land law will be one of the important parts. For example, water law also can be used here. Agricultural law, here we talk about also some land regulation, administrative regulation, also maybe financial regulation, so a mixture of other branches. So we see the branches of law in Russian Federation are rather wide. In different countries can be wider or a bit more narrow, but in usual system it's rather close. So to talk more contract about this regulation, we first of all should talk about the constitution. In most jurisdictions, constitutional law is enshrined in a written document, which is called constitution, sometimes together with amendments or other constitutional laws. In some countries, however, such a supreme entrenched written document doesn't exist, so historical and political reason. So, for example, the Constitution of the United Kingdom is unwritten one, but it doesn't mean that there are no regulation at all. They know it and also protect their basic principles. If we talk about the Constitution of Russian Federation, it was adopted by a national referendum in 12th of December 1993 with 54.5% of votes. The constitution took effect on the date it was published. It was 25th of December of 1993. It set out the fundamental of government as well as proclaiming the rule of law. Also the ideological neutrality of the state, political pluralism, competitive elections and separation of powers, guaranteeing fundamental human rights to Russian people and also to foreigners which are on the territory of Russian Federation. This constitution, the Constitution of Russian Federation, established a semi-presidential system. Actually, nowadays it's called presidential parliamentary system that encompasses strong executive power and increased the independence for the president. Since it was adopted, the constitution is considered to be the supreme law of the territory of Russian Federation. So on the whole territory, it had the biggest power. Article 15 of the constitution says that shall have supreme legal force and have direct effect and shall be applicable through the entire territory of the Russian Federation. Courts are guided by the Constitution and the true federal and local laws. So the Constitution gives power to other laws and the possibility to regulate relations in the area which they control. So, talking about main principles of the Constitution of Russian Federation, we should put our eye on establishing human rights and freedoms, civil peace and accord, then on preserve the historical established state unity, on proceeding from universally acknowledged principles of equality and self-determination of people. Next one is revere the sovereignty, statehood of Russia and asserting the firmness of its democratic basics, strive for ensure the well-being and prosperity of Russia, control the state and its government, protect the people of Russian Federation. So we see the main principles include all the questions from the protection of people of Russian Federation, their rights, their property, and freedom, also their peace, till through the question of the regulation of the legal system, the regulation of work of main organs, till the control of the state and its government. So also the form of Russian Federation, of course it can be changed, but it should be through the referendum. We already talked with you about private law and public law and its difference, but I'll remind you a bit that private law, it's also called civil or common law, involves relationships between individuals, between governments and individuals, based on the law of contracts of torts. So it is the law in which the sides are equal and the regulation are based on this main principle. In public law, relationship between individuals and the government is on the top, and those relations between individuals which are of direct control of society. The relationship of public law governments are asymmetric and unequal. Government bodies, central or local, doesn't matter, can make decisions about the rights of individuals. So in private law, the main idea is equality. In public law, the main principle is asymmetric rights and possibility of making decision of governmental bodies. So, talking more contract about the different branches of law, we will go to the next system. First is the criminal law, one of the main and one of the most popular, one of the basic laws, involves the state imposing sanctions for defined crimes committed by individuals or businesses so that society can achieve its brand of justice and a peaceable social order. This differs from civil law, and that civil actions are disputes between two parties. They're not significant public concern. So criminal law, it's about the punishment in a case the person broke the law, but the breaking of the law, it should be contracted by articles of criminal code or criminal laws. So if you or not, I mean, a person, any person just thinks that he or she broke the law, but in the criminal code or criminal laws there are no such situations, it would not be the criminal law action, and there will be no punishment. In administrative law, we talk about the body of law which regulates bureaucratic managerial procedures and define the power of administrative agencies. This body of law regulates international trade, manufacturing, pollution, taxation, and other like. So the administrative law is also about the regulation, also about the behavior of people, but in just several areas. For example, it can be about traffic and actions while driving. It can be about manufacturing, for example. It can also regulate some not dangerous breakings of law, taxation, not paying the taxation, of course, not just taxation, and so on. So the next one is labor law, is the study of tripartite in industrial relationship between workers, employers, and trade union. Individual employment law refers to workplace rights such as job security, health and safety, or a minimum wage. So in labor law, we can find all the necessary information about the workplace, about the workers, about their rights and possibilities, about the employers, and those information which can regulate the employer's work, and so on. Civil procedure and criminal procedure are those types of law which concern the rules that courts must follow as trial and appeals procedure. Both concern citizens' rights to fair trial or hearing. So it means that in these procedures, in these types of law, we can find out the main principles of working of, for example, police officers, of courts, of advocates, of all the procedure which connect the person with the system of jurisprudence. So the next one is immigration law and nationality law. It concerns the right of foreigners to live and work in a national state that is not their own, and to acquire or lose citizenship. Both also involve the right of asylum and the problem of stateless individuals. In this law, we talk about the possibility of moving from one country to another, the possibility of working on other territories, and the regulation of the number of people, for example, and their characteristics on the territory of Russian Federation. So the next one is family law. It covers marriage and divorce proceedings, the right of children, and rights to property and money in the event of separation. So I think this law doesn't need explanation because it's about the family and all the regulation in the family. So the next one is commercial law, commerce, complex contract and proper law, the law of agencies, insurance law, bills of exchanges, insolvency and bankruptcy law and sale law are all important, and also it includes the international regulation from the medievals, the main principles of the trade, which is called lex mercatoria. It's from Latin. It's translated like trade law, international trade law. The next one is tax law. It involves regulation that concern value added tax, corporate tax, and income tax. Also punishment in the case the person doesn't pay taxes, and so on. So also that rather important, especially for the government, the system of regulation. So, intellectual property law aims at safeguarding creators and other procedures of intellectual goods and services. Here we can see legal rights such as copyright, trademark, patent, and related rights, which result from intellectual activities in the industrial, literary, and artistic fields. So here we talk about all the procedure from the creating something new to put it in register, for example, if it's needed. We talk about, for example, patents, or about having the possibility to protect your creation. Space law is a relatively new field of law, dealing with aspects of international law regarding human activities on Earth orbit and outer space. This law is mostly international law, but regulates the questions on the territory just of Russian Federation. If we need the international regulation, we will talk to international conventions. So, also some public services and utilities. Water law, for example, especially since privatization became popular and took management of services away from the public law. We talk about the lakes, the rivers, the possibility of their using, and so on. A lot of questions in this part. Environmental law is increasingly important, of course, important law, which especially in light of the Kyoto Protocol's international document which regulates the environmental question, and it's also the potential danger for climate changes or so on. Every question which can be regulated with the ecological area is regulated by the environmental law. So this protection also serves to penalize pollution within domestic legal systems. So in this law we also have a lot of regulation in international, like in international positions, also in national legal systems. So the medical law, the branch of law which concerns the prerogatives and responsibilities of medical professionals and the right of the patients, it should be confused with medical jurisprudence, which is a branch of medicine rather than a branch of law, because in this case a lot of information is taken from the medical documents which regulate the possibilities of way of medical workers, also of their rights, not just responsibility and obligations, also rights, and rights and obligations of patients also. So the main branch of medical law are the law of torts, most notably like medical malpractice, and criminal law can regulate most of the relations between the doctor and the patient. So, of course, in relation of medical practice and treatment, it's two main parts, but also we can talk about some basic regulation in civil law, in administrative law, and of course, in labor law regulation. So for today, it's the last information I give you about legislation in Russian Federation in your lectures. I also give you some information about other countries, especially for those countries which are most interesting for you. So if you'll have questions or some extra information, they can be solved on our practice lessons. For today, wish you a good day and good time for today, and say goodbye to you. So see you next time.